Lots going on in the NFL world as we get ready for the new league year and the start of free agency. Big extensions for Maxx Crosby, Zack Baun, DK Metcalf on the trade block, and a whole lot more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love our everydayers. Let us know you stop by. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube. And, of course, subscribe while you're there. If you're new to the program, hang out with us every day as we break down this league throughout the offseason. It's trade season. It's signing. It's cut season. It's free agency, draft. NFL never sleeps. That's why we do this podcast every day, even through the offseason. So subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And some fascinating turns of events. And we talk a lot about team building. That's, what we do. It's how we are both wired here, Matt. And so I think it's a fascinating time of year for how teams put things into place and how we look back on some things, including wide receiver contracts, which, in my opinion, jumped the shark a long time ago. And so I want to talk about some of that with receivers that are getting traded left and right and guys on the trade block. But we got to start with some big-time money being made out there by two defensive players before free agency. Maxx Crosby gets a 3-year extension, besting Nick Bosa's record for the highest paid defensive player in history with guaranteed monies and years. And we've got some looming contracts and guys that are probably going to leapfrog Maxx Crosby very soon as well. And Zack Baun, what a turn of events for him. Kind of like a tweener player. Is he an edge rusher? Is he an off-ball linebacker? Things don't work out swimmingly early in his career. Ends up with Vic Fangio's defense in Philadelphia and gets $17 million per year after showing out and being just a phenomenal player, defensive player of the year type of season for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. A day after they give more money to Saquon Barkley, they do the deal with Zack Baun on the defensive side of the ball.
Let's start with Baun. The Crosby one's a bigger conversation to me. I mean, Baun, Warner had a slightly down year. He had an ankle, but he's still awesome. He's the best linebacker on the planet. I don't think anyone's going to fight us on that. Baun was maybe the best linebacker in the league, though, this year. I mean, certainly rivaled Warner. He had a tremendous year, and I would definitely put him amongst the best if I were to grab a linebacker to start my team with right now. I mean, he plays the run, the pass. He has a pass rush profile, which is kind of a side note. We're seeing it in this draft, too. Like Campbell with the coming out of Alabama. Micah Parsons is a poster boy, where some of these linebacker edge tweeners are getting a little bit more successful. I mean, it's just one more club in their bag. And I think that's kind of a trend we're seeing. But Baun's not as good a pass rusher as Micah Parsons. I'm not saying that, but it's just another thing he can do. He's awesome. He's worth the money.
It's up to the team to make use of good football players.
Yeah.
You see it all the time, and there's a lot of tweeners, and you have your Kyle Van Oys, and you have your Hassan Reddicks, and sometimes you see a guy and it's like, well, he's too small. Well, he's a great pass rusher, so you got to find a way to get him as a pass rusher. And sometimes it's the opposite. We're like, is he really big and athletic enough? He's got a good pass rush repertoire. So let's make him a full-time pass rusher. It's like, actually, you got that one wrong too. He's actually an off-ball linebacker who can rush the passer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Leo Chenal is another one's like that. And there's a lot of teams utilizing a lot of different guys, a lot of different skill sets. And the league is going more positionless on both sides of the ball, especially offense. So the defense has to be that way as well. So having 7 guys up front who can all get after the quarterback is pretty valuable, but you have to have some guys who can cover and run and hit still as well. And so finding those players and utilizing them correctly. And it's really awesome to see a player like Zack Baun, and you remember him, the draft process. He's a tweener. Which one is he? I don't know. And didn't work out in one spot. And then a team says, no, he's this actually. He's like, oh, you're right. He's exactly that. Look how awesome he is. And it was, I always bring up Hassan Reddick because he was the exact opposite of that. And he was too small. I was
thinking about the Cardinals in general, just not knowing what to do with these guys.
These guys, they get all these tweener guys and they use them all wrong. It was pretty
all wrong. Right.
That run with Steve Keim was like, man, you guys are just doing this wrong every single time. Like, you're bound to get one right. And like, nope, we're going to use them all wrong.
The process might not have been bad. Like maybe even they were a little ahead of their time, but they just screwed it up time and time again. Right.
And then some player, like you get Simmons in Arizona, who's just a tweener and not good at either.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have that as like great athlete, but not really a good football player. Zack Baun's the opposite. He's a great football player. They found the way to utilize him. So, just because a player is not great in his first spot or is a little underwhelming, especially at linebacker in the modern age of the NFL, there's lots of different ways and lots of different schemes. And don't bury a guy because he's not amazing in his first spot, I think is maybe the lesson there. And good on him for coming through it, and good on Fangio and the Eagles for recognizing it.
And Fangio is a perfect example here too, because the cover 4 stuff that's going across the league, and there's so much too high shells to as well. Take away the big play. So we know that defenses live in nickel and dime, of course, 4-man fronts. So if I can't get home with 4, I need someone else that can rush the passer reasonably well, not just run into a running back. And Baun's perfect for that. These off the ball guys. It's just, I think we'll see more of it. Is my point with that.
Speaking of rushing the passer, Maxx Crosby, he's reiterated that money's great, but he wants to win too. So where are we at right now with the Las Vegas Raiders and their rebuild? Tom Brady clearly more involved now in that situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, new GM there, new head coach. What do you think of the Raiders? Where are they at? Can they build a winner around Maxx Crosby?
We've been doing the show, 4, 5, 6 years? I don't even know at this point. But I mean, there's been some Raiders fans that aren't my biggest fans, to be honest with you, over the years. And I've changed my tune on this team so much because I think you need to realize how important cash spending, we just talked about the Eagles, they're the champs of this, is in this league. And now the Raiders can keep up a little bit. And here's what happened. I mean, Mark Davis sold a portion of the team to Tom Brady and others and put a whole big wad of cash in his pocket that he can give the players, as opposed to, I forget what podcast I was listening to, but he was talking about how you California folks are house wealthy, but don't have any money for groceries. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what the Raiders were, like we have this house is worth a ton because the real estate's so expensive, but then we can't buy groceries, I have no liquidity because, and that was the Raiders.
A little side note on that conversation. I talked to my contractor. We were having some work done at our house here in California. And not only do I live in California, I live in an expensive area code in California. And he was like, we could build a fence around your entire property that costs $50,000. I could build an entire house for $50,000 in the Midwest somewhere. It was like, God, man,
my first house was $66,000. I lived in it for 10 years, and it was 3-bedroom, and it wasn't bad, right? Anyway, so I commend the Raiders for everything you just said. We're going to have Brady, Carroll, the most expensive offensive coordinator, be the guys in charge of what's going on here. That's 2 big-time Hall of Famers and an expensive offensive coordinator, and keep your best guy and team him with Christian Wilkins. And then they go get the guard that Cincy cut. And, they're just active, and they seem like they have a plan for the first time in forever. And I love it. But I also think that this Crosby signing and the timing of it is super interesting to me, in that we can get the Cowboys maybe in the next segment, but they moved a lot of money around with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. Even maybe in the next 5 minutes, Micah Parsons is going to sign a contract more than Crosby's. But then the Bengals are over here going, well, we got Hendrickson, who's not quite as worth the same amount as these guys, who want to trade. And the Bengals publicly said they're going to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback. So the price keeps going. That's just a dumb thing for the Bengals to do. First of all, you're right.
The Bengals are
they're not happy about what happened the last 24 hours.
No, and they're going to be less happy when Parsons signs his deal. Or is Parsons going to try to wait out Jamar Chase? And
I don't know. Either way,
he's going to want to outdo the other. And Duke Tobin, in front of, what are you doing in front of a camera? We're gonna make him this. Oh no! Now you publicly said it. Now
right.
You have to eat that. And
you just phrased it like we're gonna make him the highest paid wide receiver, because then it just means $1 more than Justin Jefferson. I mean, okay, right.
But you have to compete with defensive ends, and that kind of leads into our next conversation about wide receivers and wide receiver money. And There's a lot of weird stuff going on with wide receivers in the NFL. I think part of it is because wide receivers are weird in general, like just how human beings for whatever reason. And every team is ready to trade their wide receivers, but why nobody wants to trade their defensive ends? Why are we paying wide receivers like defensive ends? I want to get to that conversation next. DK Metcalf on the trade block. A lot going on with the Seattle Seahawks. We've got players released and players being re-upped with their teams. We've got a lot of trade potential as well. All that more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Chewy. We talked a lot about Larry Bird in the Williamson family. Congrats on his 8 years as a Williamson. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, whether you're shopping for food, treats, even pet healthcare, and cats, dogs, birds, hamsters, whatever it is. Over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands. Chewy has everything your pet needs. And, fish, reptiles, small pets, large pets, all of it. And Chewy makes it easy to manage your pet's health as well with prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out now nationwide. And for our family, auto ship has been a game changer because, saves us time, saves us a hassle. And pretty much everything in my life has become auto pay, everything, because I will forget. And I'll wake up in the morning and be like, oh, sorry, cat. We don't have any food, right? But with Chewy, it shows up. We know how long it's going to take. It's on the doorstep, and our cat's taken care of because I will forget. And Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet healthy and happy. So right now, you can save $20 on your first order. Get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking on the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking on the link in the podcast description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. So Tyler Lockett released by the Seattle Seahawks, and on the very same day, DK Metcalf says he wants to be traded, and the Seattle Seahawks say, yeah, okay, we'll look into that for you. So Deebo Samuel already been traded. Cooper Kupp on the trade block. We got Christian Kirk is released now. Cooper Kupp, right, Matt, probably going to be released. It feels like not going to actually get traded. And now DK Metcalf is on the trade block, and he's coming off an injury that kind of gives people some problems sometimes with that patellar tendon. It's not I don't think it's a complete tear. It wasn't surgically repaired, but it's DK Metcalf. You start to get to the back end of the expensive wide receiver contracts. And, this ties into the conversation you're just having about Jamar Chase and all these wide receivers that are getting mega paid. And 6 months ago, Brandon Ayuk almost got traded to the Steelers, instead got paid. The 49ers now still already willing to listen to trade offers for Brandon Ayuk. And it feels like 9 out of 10 teams that paid these massive contracts to wide receivers are either unhappy with the contract, ready to trade the wide receivers. And I think it just is a lesson that, how did we get here with wide receivers?
How did we get here? Yeah.
Wide receivers are important. And I just think team building wise, they shouldn't be in the class of players that they're being paid like. And there's so many good wide receivers available. You can find them in the NFL draft. And I think we're starting to see that. And if you have it's almost quarterback is there in a way, you almost can't overpay a superstar quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about this so much with the 49ers with Brock Purdy being up for a contract negotiation and a potential extension. And I'm like, there's Purdy and there's Tua, and they're this class of quarterback where they're a good quarterback and the teams are afraid to lose them because they don't want to get worse at quarterback. But if they were on the open market and Josh Allen was on the open market, Josh Allen would get $100 million a year. Right?
I'm not sure. It might be take whatever you want.
Yeah.
Here's a portion of the team.
You own the team now. Right.
Yeah.
And for these other quarterbacks, it'd be you might even actually get less on the open market than you're bidding against yourself because you're telling the agent you're afraid to not have this player. So they've got you, especially after free agency in the draft.
What are we going to do with that if we don't have him?
Yeah, you have to go into the season with a quarterback. And wide receivers has gotten to this place as well where it's the top guys are the top guys, but there's a lot of players being paid like the top guys that don't create offense by themselves. And wide receivers are so dependent. We got to shout out Jim Harbaugh because he had this conversation with reporters about their pick in the draft last year. And they went with Joe Alt. Yeah. And he's like, a wide receiver needs a quarterback, an offensive line, everything else to be successful. And a quarterback needs an offensive line to be successful, and our entire team needs an offensive line to be successful. So we're going to build through the offensive line. We're going to draft the offensive lineman who can help everybody else be great, not the guy who needs everybody else to be great to help him.
Not to mention, I mean, and Harbaugh said it perfectly. That's a great example. If you can protect for 0.2 seconds longer, then Joe average receivers starting to get open too. Like it's just hard to cover these guys. Like I don't think. I love the way you said it. Like, how do we get here? Has the league just gone too far in these receiver contracts? It's not a premium position, but people sometimes refer to it as a premium position. Tackles so much harder to find. Edge rushers. I'd rather invest in defensive tackles, big time difference makers. Chris Jones, those type of dudes. But I don't think, we talked about Chase earlier and Jefferson. I would even put Lamb in that conversation. That the truly elites, I don't think the Vikings or Bengals will be sad about their contract, But I do think the Ayuk Metcalf group is, like the really good Pro Bowlers, but not elite. Maybe I'm wrong on the top guys. I don't know.
I'd put Lamb even closer to the second tier because he's such a.
I almost didn't mention him because those two are the top two. Player. Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest volume guys I've seen recently is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And he caught so many passes, and he was really nice for your fantasy football teams, and he's going to catch even more passes, so you should draft him again in your fantasy football teams.
Sure.
But how much does a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba really create on his own? He's not amazing after the catch. He's not amazing down the field. Mm-hmm. They forced the ball to him, and he's moved around in situations that are super advantageous, and he's super high volume, but he doesn't create a lot on his own. And I think he's gonna be the next guy. He's gonna get paid a ton, and it's like I think you can find that right? It's more about the quarterback, offensive line, defensive line. There's some guys that are special, and you pay them at kind of any position, right? And that goes for wide receiver too. But the next group of guys, we've really pushed them up. And I think as a league, teams are realizing, maybe we shouldn't have started paying wide receivers like defensive ends because they're not in that category of importance, right? And scarcity. And then
being able to take games over on their own. They can't. If you and I are the quarterback, it doesn't matter if Chase and Jefferson are our receivers. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So two things too, I think it applies to Metcalf too. That maybe wide receiver is more scheme dependent than we give it credit for too. Like when Russell Wilson's throwing moon balls, I pay DK Metcalf. But now the new staff comes in and is like, we want more of the JSN type receiver. So he's not as good a scheme fit for us. And we know that the coaching changes happen like crazy. And you can't just plug and play, a big slot versus a vertical guy. Not everyone uses these dudes the same. And this is going to sound bad and stereotypical, but we mentioned it off the air. There's a lot of weird human beings that play wide receiver, and some selfish people in general. And it's, the great ones too. Michael Irvin. Chris Carter. All those guys are selfish. Give me the football. And maybe after you sign a big deal, you aren't as interested. I don't know. I'm just saying, it's a weird group of human beings is all I'm saying.
And DBs are a little bit weird too. It has to be from the one-on-ones that happen your whole life growing up, because especially in 7-on-7s now, and these guys going at each other and they're always talking trash. And it's this one-on-one mentality that's kind of separate from the football team. Like everyone else is lined up over there in the middle of the field. You're out here with this guy and the DBs and the wide receiver, and they have this separate thing going on. I think that creates a little bit of some of the weirdos that we see out there at those two positions. By the way, did you hear Pac-Man Jones talking about how in 12 years he never used his own urine in his drug test for the league?
I did. Yeah, I was not very surprised.
Love that.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like a basketball when you clear out and you leave Jordan 1-on-1 on their best defender, and they do that all day long.
It has to be it. It has to be part of the reason why they act a certain way, and you have to be wired a certain way to get through that and win those battles, right? And get to the final boss, which is the NFL.
Yeah, selfishness isn't a bad thing at that position. I want the damn ball, I'll use the example. Antonio Brown was a lunatic, but the biggest thing that he had a problem with was everyone's like, oh, he cares about the stats. No, he complained on the sideline about, get me the ball because I'm our best player and that gives us the best chance to win. It really is a team mentality, but it's also a selfish mentality. Yes. my buddies are on the sidelines, like, he doesn't care about his numbers. He wants to win, but he's smart enough to realize if you get him the ball, you win.
Right. And,
you know?
and again, like the mentality of it and how you pay the guys is because, they're how many times does a receiver get the ball? Like 8 times in a game?
Yeah, 12 targets if you're great.
Lineman has to block 70 times a game, right? Like, and everyone else is dependent on that. And the wide receiver is dependent on his number getting called, the ball coming his way, everything being blocked up so his quarterback can deliver the ball, the quarterback delivering the ball where it needs to be. And so much goes into that, which is why the NFL is so fascinating. I want to talk one more second about wide receivers in the NFL.
Me too. I got one more thing too I want to throw in that.
And a team that actually is the way I would draw it up and how they are building their offense and roster at wide receiver specifically. And then what does DK Metcalf worth on the trade market? Some players getting released and are available out there as well, including a past highly paid wide receiver who will be paid no more by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next. On the subject of DK Metcalf, Josina Anderson reporting that some third-round picks have been offered to the Seattle Seahawks. What do you think about DK Metcalf? And I know the Steelers have been. It's funny because I'm going to argue right now that the Steelers did it right for a long time at wide receiver. They did it right when they got the guys that they have right now, but they've also been really, really looking for another wide receiver recently, and it's found it somewhat difficult. And maybe that's because the market is so inflated that they don't want to pay the top level guys that they need to bring in and overpay potentially for some wide receivers for 2 years of a 4-year contract and then cut a guy like we're seeing with a lot of players like Christian Kirk. But with DK Metcalf, how much do you think a team would give up for DK Metcalf? What's he worth to you right now? Because he's a very specific type of wide receiver, and for the Steelers specifically, and we keep bringing up the Steelers just because you know them so well, Matt, and because they've been looking for a wide receiver for a long time. He's kind of too similar to the guy they already have in George Pickens, right?
And it would be way too volatile on the field together. Those two are both lunatics.
Yeah, both maniacs, both of them.
Yeah, that soap opera would write itself. We've talked about that around here a lot. One thing I'll throw out there, and I'll get to it in a minute, is I also think that these wide receivers are on the move a lot too, because when a team gets cash strapped, that's like the easiest cut to make because they're like, well, we'll just go to the draft. We'll dump this dude and his $20 million, pick up a pick, and we'll draft a guy in the second round, and we'll lose something, but it's not too bad. I mean, it's the easiest position to replenish. So first move is cutting the receiver, Go ahead.
I want to highlight the Green Bay Packers because there's been Packers.
I think that's the theme.
There's been Packers fans that have been like, oh man, we need to draft a wide receiver in the first round. Haven't drafted a wide receiver in the first round in 20 years. And Gutekunst keeps getting asked about it. Gutekunst keeps getting asked about it, the GM of the Packers. And I go, we don't have an aversion to drafting wide receivers. We just got to be the right guy. And if he's there, we'll draft him in the first round. They tried to trade up at the end of the first round to get Christian Watson a couple years ago. Weren't able to trade up and still got him in the second round. But if I was to point to a team, how would you build it? That's how I would build it. Draft a second, third round.
They're the one linked to DK the most. Yeah. And they're linked to DK. Like, I don't quite get it, but I could see them doing it just because let's get Jordan Love a boost. And Watson is injured and he's a souped up version of Watson, So, but I guess Seattle came out and said this morning, we're looking for a first and a third for Metcalf. Like, that's lovely. I mean, I'm hoping there's a new Bentley in the driveway too. I mean, like, that ain't happening. I think it's a 2. Maybe it's a package of 3s, something like that.
This sounds about right.
They're really cash strapped right now.
It's funny because these teams. This is what gets me: is these teams are so willing to throw around the money and sign these free agents and sign their own guys to big money contracts, but then they're like, oh well, we don't want to trade for this player because he's making too much money. Well, why are you signing the guys for that much money in the first place? Like, the economics of the NFL is super weird sometimes. I just don't get where the value is and why DK Metcalf has worked the contract he signed and suddenly not worked the contract he signed. Or Deebo Samuel or Jonathan Allen is like, he makes $15 a year. We're not going to trade for that contract. If you signed a top defensive tackle, you're going to give him $30 million a year. So what's $15 million a year is nothing for a good starting defensive tackle. Like, it's so weird how a guy's worth nothing or everything in the NFL. And they're worth everything. You sign them to a new contract. Well, suddenly they're worth nothing.
So speaking of weird NFL economics, the other side of it that you and I haven't talked about enough, but I think it applies to the Bears going to get two expensive guards, but it really, really applies to the Patriots. Like, they have more money than they can spend. You know, like if you're the Pats, what do you care if DK Metcalf, what his contract is? You just need football players. You know what I mean? Like, we'll give you that early third and a fifth for DK. And he doesn't even, he's a grain of sand on the beach of your salary cap. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have a hard time spending your money.
Yeah. And if anything, the Patriots just need to be able to talk free agents into wanting to go there so they can pay.
Yeah.
They can spend.
It some good players, no matter how you get them.
Yeah. Joey Bosa, speaking of older players getting cut, contract getting a little bit too high. Bosa's big problem is he's been injured a lot.
So much.
Yeah. And I don't know. There's been a lot of talk of reuniting, including from,
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
I mean, including from their mom. Mama Bear Bosa has been putting it on Instagram and stuff and putting the picture of the two boys together in 49ers uniforms. So the family wants it to happen. But one thing we've known from both Joey and Nick Bosa so far, do you remember the holdout from Joey Bosa before he even signed his rookie contract? And then the extended holdout from Nick Bosa? Like, these guys don't take discounts. So
no, right. I mean, even as a rookie, like you said with Bosa, right.
The only way Joey reunites with Nick in San Francisco is if he takes a discount. And I don't think Bosa's take discounts. So I don't know if that's as likely as a lot of people think it is for the brothers to be reunited on that 49ers defensive line.
Yeah, you gave it more thought than I did, but I thought originally, like, no matter where he signs, he's got to be on like a 1-year prove-it deal to me. I mean, just because I can't invest in your health situation at the moment, you know, not to the level of the player you are, you know. I'm not saying he's done, but, man, he would be a hard one for me to jump into.
The poster child of overpaid wide receivers. Remember when the Jaguars signed Christian Kirk and we're like, what the hell was this deal? And then later on, you look at it and you're like, it's a whatever it was, 4 or 5 year deal. It's actually really a 2-year deal, and they have some. Well, they took that out, and so Christian Kirk, one of those players that is now back on the free agent market, released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if I'm not mistaken, he was nearly like, how many near Pittsburgh Steelers have there been at wide receiver over the last couple of years?
Oh, I know. It's been crazy, but that's one I can almost confirm there was a deal in place. We'll trade him to you on Monday, and on Sunday he broke his collarbone. Yeah, like something like just a bad luck for everybody involved. Or I think it'd be a Steeler. We even talked about it on the show a week ago, saying if I was the Steelers, I'd send him a 7th-round pick. His contract's not that bad. I mean, it sounded weird when he signed it, but Steelers have money. I don't want to fight with the other 30 teams. Take a 7th, and we'll take him. You know,
a lot of people have blamed Trent Baalke and the Jacksonville Jaguars for the inflated market because Christian Kirk that was the offseason where it kind of started. And it was like, oh, wow, Christian Kirk's going to make that much. And then the top wide receivers are like, well, we got to make more than Christian Kirk. And all of a sudden, over 2 consecutive off seasons, like, wide receiver money went kind of crazy. And Christian Kirk was a part of the beginning of that. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, I remember being shocked at the money he got. And then 6 months later going, it's not as bad as I thought because receivers are getting paid like crazy. Right. And back to the beginning of the show, I do think it's a bit of a mistake. I mean, I do think that's an overpaid position right now. Yeah. Like, I'd rather pay George Kittle. You know, I'd rather pay, Bow. I mean, the tight ends are the bargains.
I've been saying it. The best money right now in the NFL is on top tight ends because, like offensive linemen, they affect everything and they're pass catchers. So, like, you get a wide receiver who can also block for your run game, and now you pay him half as much as wide receivers are getting. Like, it's a no-brainer. If you have a top tight end, hold on to that guy forever and pay him at the top of the market because it's the best money you can spend on your football team.
I mean, let alone, Kelsey and Kittle are the off the charts examples, but like the career Zach Ertz has had. I mean, linebackers can't cover him for a decade, and this, like first downs he's created and things like that at a bargain rate.
Yeah, and the Commanders got him for nothing, right?
Right. I mean, I know he's older now, but there's so many examples of those guys. Heath Miller around here. I mean, not Hall of Famers, but guys that last forever. They fade away slow. Old man game at the Y. They get first downs deep into their 30s and score touchdowns, and give them money.
A flurry of stuff over the last 24 hours. It'll probably be the same in the next 24 hours. Any other notes before we get out of here, Matt?
I don't think so. I mean, there's just a lot going on. I mean, everyone's still trying to get cap compliant. I do think things like Micah Parsons are going to happen. My hunch is Justin Fields will be locked up here in Pittsburgh. maybe before we talk on Monday, so in the next 48 hours or so. That's my hunch. I don't have any inside scoop on that, but I am a little doubt in,
Still some more trades on the horizon, some more signings on the horizon, teams getting ready for the new league year. And of course, we've got it covered for you every single day here on Peacock and Williamson. Subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.